Welcome to this presentation about the key changes in ISO 9001-2015 and IATF 16949-2016 related to the top management processes within an organisation. My name is Paul Hardiman, Director of Quality Partner. I've been working with quality management systems for 25 years and I'm an IATF witness auditor and trainer. So looking into responsibilities for top management, we're going to consider two key processes in a typical automotive organisation. The first process is establishing the organisation's strategic direction, including the policy and objectives. The second process that we're going to take a look at is the important process of management review. So let's take a look at the requirement 4.1 in ISO 9001-2015, which is related to understanding the organisation and its context. So the requirement is the organisation shall determine the external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction, and that may affect its ability to achieve the intended results of its quality management system. The organisation shall monitor and review the information about the external and internal issues. So this is a requirement that top management are going to have to address within the scope of the quality management system. So now let's take a look at what ISO mean by establishing the strategic direction. To do this, we're going to take a look using the turtle diagram. So the key inputs into establishing the organisation's strategic direction could include the external and the internal context of which the organisation operates. We're going to take a look at that in a bit more detail in a minute. Obviously, to establish the strategic direction, we need to understand the customer requirements, we need to understand capacity requirements, we need to understand the organisation knowledge that we need and we need to retain. Now within ISO 9001 we need to understand interested party requirements, and we also need to understand all the process risks and opportunities that may affect achieving the organisation's strategic direction. So once top management have been through the process of establishing the strategic direction, let's take a look at what some of the outputs of this process may be. The first thing is we need to have a clearly defined and documented strategic direction. Now, one of the requirements in the previous edition of ISO TS 16949 was for an organisation to have a business plan containing the organisation policy and objectives. That requirement is no longer included in IATF 16949-2016, but the business plan can be used as evidence that you have defined and documented the organisation's strategic direction. But this may be an opportunity to take another look to make sure the business plan does take into account both internal and external factors. Obviously, one of the outputs needs to be the quality policy and the objectives that as an organisation we're trying to meet within the strategic direction. One of the key changes in IATF 16949 is that you have clearly defined process owners. So top management needs to make sure for each of the organisation quality management system processes that there are clearly defined owners for each of those business processes. The next thing is great developing a strategic direction, but how are we going to communicate that direction internally, and how are we going to communicate the relevant parts of the strategic direction externally, both to the customer and to interested parties. Within both ISO 9001-2015 and within IATF 16949-2016, we see far more defined requirements about internal and external communication. One of the outputs of establishing the strategic direction should be making sure that we have got the required resources and capacity to make sure that we can meet customer requirements, and that we have got clearly defined contingency plans in the event of potentially things going wrong. I've mentioned in previous presentations that contingency planning has been significantly strengthened within IATF 16949/2016. So please take a look at this requirement to make sure that this is aligned with your organisation's strategic direction. For example, if your strategic direction is a period of growth, how are we going to manage contingency within that period of growth? So now let's take a look at management review. Management review has been a fundamental quality management system requirement going back even to the days of BS 5750 and the early versions of ISO 9001. So the requirement for management review is still there, but now it is under a different requirement headed 9.3. So if we take a look at the IATF requirement 9.3.1.1, it says that management review should be conducted at least annually. Now my view is an annual management review is insufficient. Maybe the only time that an annual management review would be feasible if it is the perfect organisation. If the organisation is meeting all the internally defined objectives and meeting all the externally defined objectives, and if the organisation is in a period of stability. But what the requirement says is the frequency shall be increased based upon risk of compliance to customer requirements resulting from internal or external changes impacting the quality management system and performance related issues. So we cannot just say within our quality management system we are going to have an annual management review, full stop. We have to look at changes and we have to look at performance. And there is also nothing saying that management review has to be a single meeting. Management review process can be made up of a series of different meetings. Each meeting has to involve some level of top management, but each meeting can have a separate agenda and an expected output. So please don't go into this thinking you have to have one special management meeting called management review. So, as I've mentioned, you will all have an existing management review process. I suggest you go back and review ISO 9001/2015, and you go back and review ISO TS 16949/2016 to look at the changes. But in this slide, what we can see as an input, there are some different things that we need to consider within the management review process. For example, we need to include in management review an assessment of manufacturing feasibility for any changes. We need to include as an input our warranty performance, if that is relevant to your organisation. We need to include performance against effectiveness and efficiency measures that we've defined within our strategic direction. And when we look at customer performance, we should also be looking as an input into management review at customer scorecards. This has been a requirement for external audits, that on each audit, the external auditors have a look in their audit preparation at online customer scorecards. So now there is a requirement you do this as part of the management review process. So what I listed here are just some of the things that have changed within the input to management review. So what about output to management review? As well as the outputs that were previously defined in ISO TS 16949/2009, in the new IATF standard, there is maybe more emphasis on a few points. One of the things there is a key emphasis on is where we are not meeting the customer performance targets, there are very clearly defined action plans in place, and these action plans are agreed to as part of the management review meeting. The next thing that management need to consider as an output of management review is opportunities for improvement. This is not a new requirement, but we need to think about opportunities for improvement linked to the risk and opportunities we've identified within each of the processes. The next thing we need to think about is What changes do we need to make to the quality management system as part of things that we've identified within the management review process? So one of the outputs from management review should be looking at not just a record of the management review meeting or forum, but how are we taking that output and improving our quality management system? And the last thing the standard talks about is keeping documented information that the management review process is actually working. In the previous standard, it talked about records. The word record is no longer used within ISO 9001-2015 and has been replaced by the term documented information. So here are some of the key outputs, in addition to what you already have as outputs of management review, that you need to consider within the transition process. So let's just quickly then summarise the changes within IATF 16949-2016 linked to ISO 9001-2015 that will affect top management. The first thing is there is far more about top management leadership and commitment to the quality management system. Now, I know some of you watching this will already believe your top management is fully committed, but others of you may think, actually, this is an area that we need to significantly improve. We need to get top management buy-in to really driving the quality management system and risk-based thinking to all levels of the organisation. The second requirement, which is 4.1 within the standard, is to have a clearly defined strategic direction. The next change is we need to make sure the quality management system is aligned with the organisation business processes and that each process has a clearly defined process owner. One of the fundamental changes we see within the standards is top management to promote risk-based thinking to all levels within the organisation. And this is where top management, if they're going to promote risk-based thinking, need themselves to understand what it is. The next thing is to engage, direct and support employees within the organisation to make sure that they are meeting or exceeding the requirements of their customers and that the processes are working effectively and efficiently. So this is really true management commitment by making sure that everybody understands that they are committed. The next thing is about not just understanding customer requirements, but understanding the requirements of all interested parties. Maybe that's done, but that needs to now be formalised and included within the scope of the quality management system. Finally, we need to think about management review. This should not just be an annual event, but we need to modify the frequency of management review based upon results and based upon risks that we've identified. So I think top management have a key role to play in making an effective transition. So, conclusion. Top management shall promote risk-based thinking. That is a requirement that will not go away. So you need to think about how are top management going to demonstrate that in an internal or external audit. Secondly, risk and opportunities must be understood and managed within all of the quality management system processes. Again, how is that going to be demonstrated within internal audits and within third-party audits? And finally, the quality management system must be fully integrated into the organisation business processes. If you can address these three key requirements and it's led by top management, this will give a significant lead into making a successful transition to ISO 9001-2015 and IATF 16949-2016.